Oh, shit.
We'll figure it out. It's also closer to us now, though.
Yeah, so we can
Just so
kind
we
of see the
can
comments.
see more comments.
So, and
New layout.
yeah, so this is going to be our layout for the time being. I can't wear my glasses though because there's a glare. That's okay. I'm gonna probably.
You can close it.
Well, no, it's closed, but it's my glasses because of the.
Yeah.
Oh, please, you can go outside. Hurry up, it's hot.
No longer blinded. Sorry, there is a glare. So before we begin talking about the Mad Trapper of Rat River, aka Albert Johnson, we are going to do a little bit of the piece on the Zoot Suit riots. Because right now there's a lot of stuff happening in LA, and to me, as somebody who studied history, specifically Mexican American history, the Zoot Suit riots feels very reminiscent. Very reminiscent. There's a lot of similar things that are going on in the Zoot Suit riots that. Can you actually turn it up? Because that's blinding me. The Zoot Suit riots, that's actually very similar to like and reminiscent to what's.
This up?
Yeah, just face it up more. Just because there's a glare. There, that works. Yeah, I can see. And there's not so much of a glare. We're going to talk a little bit about the Zoot Suit riots because with everything going on, it feels very reminiscent.
There. Yeah, see, I still have the glare because it's not too bad. And while she's down, sorry, you just had a loud crash.
Yeah.
She's gonna be talking. I'm gonna be coloring.
So,
with our touch
today. So basically, California was a part of Mexico for 27 years. And before becoming part of the United States following the Mexican-American War, there has always been a large Latino population in California and Arizona because of that.
Mm-hmm.
So many Mexicans immigrated to work to U.S. borders that needed workers in areas such as Texas, Arizona, and California. They were recruited by farm workers on large farms and also worked in these states in non-agricultural jobs.
Okay.
Now, during the Zoot Suit riots, it was actually really important during this time period that a lot of people had this idea that the Mexicans were taking all of these good jobs.
Right.
And they were making it impossible for Americans to have jobs because at one point, because LA was under construction, they actually asked, made a bunch of visas and said, hey, if you come over here, we can give you these visas. You can do the hard work. You can do the work. Because this is also during World War One. Or is it World War II? I think it's World War II.
This is good, by the way. It's molten lava.
It is World War
Dutch
II.
Bros. Go get it.
World War II during this time period.
Okay.
So basically, if you were a veteran, you would get a better job than everybody else. Veterans got the best of the jobs.
Okay.
And so there was a lot of like job insecurity at the time. And so there were actually, this is a funny story, and it is always brought up, that in the 1940s, a group of people were really upset that there were so many Mexicans in California and Los Angeles,
right,
and that they were taking up all the jobs.
Right.
And so basically, a bunch of buses came and said, we'll take you to the farm and you can work the farms.
Right, I remember that.
And
because they portray a lot of that in movies. There's certain movies that you watch that they do that.
A bunch of young white men at the time said, we can do the job. The job's easy. And then proceeded to only last a day, and the longest one that lasted was a day and a half. Oh, wow. Everybody else quit. They could not do the job.
It's too hard.
Because it was too hard and difficult.
Hi, Angie.
Hi, Angie. So there's like a lot of racial tension going on at the time during the Zoot Suit riots.
Yes.
And the Zoot Suits were a form of clothing. And actually it became almost illegal to wear them because they had said that they needed the fabric that was needed to build the Zoot Suits for the military.
By the way, I love zoot suits. They are the
Yes,
coolest thing
and
ever.
it is a jazz style, so everyone was wearing them at the time. But a lot of people got the
If I
idea.
was to sit here and say I'd wear one, but people be like, "What is she, butch?"
A zoot suiter. Um,
Like, dude,
but
they're
like
awesome.
the idea was if you wore a zoot suit, you were a punk, or as they called them, a pachulo. I think it's pachu. I can't remember the exact pronunciation. Um, but basically they were like, you are a punk, you are
She, she told you what it was.
pachucho, pachuco, pachuco, pachuco. That's the way you pronounce it. I had heard it, but my brain could not connect the dots. I wanted to work on my day off, so I'm not completely here. It was about jazz, and so everyone wore zoot
Our
suits.
translator, everybody, Angie.
Our zoot suits were worn by everyone. They were worn by anyone who loved jazz because at the time, what they wanted to be called. And
Yeah.
see, that's the thing, that some of them wanted to be called that, others didn't. It depended on the culture because zoot suits were worn by everyone. They were worn by anyone who was a lover of jazz because jazz was actually a subculture.
Mm-hmm.
It was not popular at the time.
Mm-mm.
So it was a way of expressing. It was the younger generation. So, fun fact, zoot suits were also worn by women.
He told you.
They were worn by women, but this is a typical style. They wore their hair super poofed up. They would have a flower in their hair.
So
They would
awesome.
wear like a red lip. They walked around like they had style.
Pachucas.
And the reason they wore the zoot suits was for dancing. That's the original reason. Was they started wearing it so that they could dance easier.
They're awesome.
And they could
Zoot
have
suits
movements.
are really freaking cool.
But what
They
happened?
had weapons in their hair too.
Oh
not
yeah,
allowed.
that was
Wow.
actually a rumor that was like started by the
What?
media, and of course it
Turned out to be
possibly
true?
did happen. Was that pachucas would keep nail files and knives in their hair? Not a rumor. Okay, they would keep them in their hair, and then if they needed a weapon, they would pull it out of their hair,
That's awesome.
which is wild. But the zoot suit, right? So at this time, there's a lot of like racial. Nana had knives in her hair. Damn.
Ooh,
That
would be kind of hard to put up, have that in your hair. A knife.
Well, because it was like hidden. It was
Yeah,
like
but think
tucked
about
in.
it though. How is it hidden?
Because of
Like
the bump.
no, I'm like towards
Sideways.
the scalp. Okay, there we
Probably
go.
sideways.
That's what I'm thinking.
But during this time, there's a lot of racial tension.
Right.
So they're going through all this racial tension. And what does LA decide to do? Because they need to build a new military base.
Okay.
They need to build a new military base. And they don't want to bother the nice, rich white people, right?
Why not bother them?
They instead decided to build it in a Chicano area.
Okay.
In a Mexican American area.
Okay.
And they basically built this giant, actually where Dodger Stadium is. It is actually there. You can actually see the old building.
Where's Dodger Stadium located?
Is it Dodger Stadium? It's one of the stadiums.
Okay.
In LA, where you can clearly see. You can clearly see the old military base.
Okay.
And well, the Marines wanted to go out and party. And the zoot suiters did not want the Marines in the building because the Marines were walking around like they owned the place. They were going into the community bars and acting as if their shit don't stink and all this other stuff. And the zoot suiters didn't like it. They were like, this is our neighborhood. This is our community. What are you doing? So they would block Marines from going into these bars. They're like, this is ours. You can't have it. Well, in June 3rd of 1943, things kind of boiled over. 11 sailors got off a bus and started walking towards Main Street in downtown LA.
Okay.
And they encountered a group of young Mexican American in zoot suits, which they then got into an argument. The sailors told the LAPD that it was the zoot suiters who had started it.
Of course they would.
They said they were jumped and beaten by the gang, and then the zoot suiters claimed that the altercation was started by the sailors.
Do you really think they're going to mess up those nice suits?
Exactly, and that was actually one of the stipulation of the zoot suits. Zoot suits were not allowed to be wrinkled.
Like,
you could not have a wrinkle. SoFi Stadium.
Yeah, it's like, come on. You really think that they're going to mess up them suits?
And apparently it started because the zoot suiters started calling the Marines names. They started calling him names like, people do, especially in you're an area where they're walking around like they own the town. They called the Marines names, and the Marines got upset. The LAD responded to the incident, including many off-duty officers who were identified as the Vengeance Squad. Off-duty officers identified as the Vengeance Squad.
No wrinkles and no dirt. Yep.
And the officers went to the scene seeking to clean up Main Street from what they viewed as the loathsome influence of Pachuco gangs. Because to them, zoot suits were a symbol of being a draft dodger. They were a symbol of being in a gang. It was a revolt. It was something awful.
Right.
To them, zoot suits were...
Yeah,
it was a bad day. So the next day, about 200 sailors, so on June 4th, 200 sailors, so 200 Marines, got into a convoy, about 20 taxi cabs, and headed to East Los Angeles, the center of a Mexican-American settlement.
Okay.
The sailors spotted a group of, and on the first day, I think 9 sailors were arrested that day.
Okay.
And then a whole bunch of zoot suiters were also arrested.
Okay.
So the next day, June 4th, sailors got on a convoy, about 20 taxi cabs. Exactly, and that was the thing that nobody wanted to talk about. The center I was talking about, the military center.
Lay down. Yeah.
That I was talking about.
Lay down.
It was a white-only military center based in a Mexican-American city.
Oh, wow.
So if that tells you anything.
Yeah.
So the 200 sailors got a convoy of 20 taxi cabs and headed for East Los Angeles, the center of a Mexican-American settlement. The sailors spotted a group of young zoot suiters and assaulted them with clubs. They stripped the boys of the zoot suiters and burned the tattered clothes in a pile.
That's just disrespectful.
So they stripped them naked.
That's disrespectful.
They attacked and stripped everyone they came across wearing zoot suits. Media coverage of the incident started to spread.
I wonder what would happen if they did that. Sorry, not to laugh, but they did that. I'm just laughing because I'm sitting there thinking, all right, they're going to sit there and they're going to strip dudes naked. Wonder what would happen if they came across a woman and did it to her too.
No, they would do that to anybody they ran across.
Oh, wow.
Anyone they ran across that was in a Mexican-American or other subculture-based outfit or clothing like that, they would strip them naked.
Wow.
In fact, there was actually
a piece of work.
And actually, I think there was an LA Times or a news reporting newspaper actually published a photo of 2 zoot suiters who had been stripped naked and beaten, and published the photo as the front page of the newspaper, saying the zoot suiters have surrendered, and basically gave instructions on how to strip zoot suiters. So the media was not helping this at all.
Like they do around these days.
Exactly. Hi. Yes.
Hi, Jamie.
So minorities were the ones who were wearing zoot suits. Italians, because remember, during this time period, Italians were not counted as white. Mexican Americans, the Black community, and also the Jewish community often typically wore zoot suits. And they were experiencing this at the time. And then the most baffling thing was on the second day in all the big cities. So there was a bunch of different riots that happened in bigger cities. And they did spread also to other cities, but it started in LA more.
Okay.
It was started in LA and then it spread. So during the next few days, thousands of servicemen and residents joined the attacks, marching down streets, entering bars and movie houses, and assaulting any young Mexican-American male they encountered. In one incident, sailors dragged 2 zoot suiters on stage as a film was being screened, stripped them in front of the audience, and then urinated on their suits.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. So even though police accompanied the rioters, they had orders not to arrest any, and some of them even joined the rioting.
Oh, for heaven, Betsy.
After several days, more than 150 people had been injured, and police had arrested more than 500 Mexican-American civilians on charges ranging from rioting to vagrancy. The local press lauded the attacks, describing them as a cleansing effect to rid Los Angeles of miscreants and hoodlums.
Next word out of my mouth, or does any of this sound familiar?
As the media reported the arrest of Amelia Venegas, a female zoot suiter charged with carrying a brass knuckle duster.
Nice.
While relations of female Pachucas' involvement in the riots led to frequent coverage of the females of female Pachuca gangs, the media suppressed any mention of the white mobs that were also involved.
Nice. The Nas Brooks.
So
God.
as
The chestnuts.
the riots subsided,
Uh-huh.
LA realized they needed to do something. So actually, fun fact, many people cite the Zoot Suit riots as one of the reasons LA was able to get like civil rights get started early in the civil rights movement.
Right.
Because after this, they did make a team to look at, hey, are we being a little bit, because LA had portrayed itself as being a non-racist city.
Apparently.
Yeah. Hi,
Hey,
Thomas. So they were like, we're not a racist city. So they had to, this basically made them stop, look at themselves and go, am I racist? And they actually had to look at stuff and they had to self-reflect.
Oh, just so you know, I'm looking down because I'm coloring.
And then as the riots subsided, most
So I'm
of
listening and watching, listening.
Yeah, it started the Chicano movement too.
Cool.
It started, so basically the Zoot Suits started the Chicano movement. It helped give a little bit of a leg up to the civil rights movement. It's basically was involved with a lot of things.
You know, there's something that we should do too. I don't remember when the anniversary is for Freedom Riders.
We should do a thing
But
on
we
the
should
Freedom
do
Riders.
a thing on Freedom Riders, and just so people learn more about the history. But not only that, and I know his dad pretty much no longer does it or really has anything to do with it because I think there's not many people that are still alive. Lewis,
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember his first name.
John Lewis.
John Lewis was John's dad's best friend who passed a while back. But just a lot, I don't know, because it's kind of to me, they kind of sound like they correlate with each other, but they may not. But at the same time, again, somebody in history.
That's the thing. I think it did because in 1943, they ordered a committee came out and issued its report. It determined racism to be the central cause of the riots, further stating that it was an aggravating practice of the media to link the phrase Zoot Suit with the purport of a crime.
Okay.
So the governor appointed the Peace Officers Committee on Civil Disturbances, which is like the beginning of the Civil Rights Council or whatever, to make recommendations to the police. Now, Mayor Fletcher Browron downplayed the role racial prejudice played in the riots and blamed Mexican youth gangs. The riots were caused by juvenile delinquents. He said race was not a factor.
Are you? What is that dude we just watched? Stop lying.
In June 16th, 1943, a week after the riots, First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt commented on the riots in her newspaper column. The question goes deeper than just suits. It is a racial protest. I have been worried for a long time about Mexican racial situations. If it is a problem with roots going a long way back, we do not always face these problems as we should.
Yep. It always goes. It never goes the way that you that it should go. It either goes left or it goes right.
It really.
It's never.
It's exactly. It's never a factor when they want to look good.
Yep.
And that is the thing. So I just wanted to talk about the Zoot Suit riots, just simply because with everything going on right now, it just felt very reminiscent of the Zoot Suit riots.
Yeah.
I remember hearing stories of how like Zoot Suiters were defending their community. They were defending their community, and the Marines would just beat the crap out of them. They would go into there are rumors that people from San Francisco and other military bases nearby would drive all the way to downtown LA just to help beat up the Zoot Suiters. And to me that doesn't make any sense. It's just yeah. But we've talked about the Zoot Suiters. The parade just happened in LA too. It was beautiful. Yeah, exactly. The parade happens every June 3rd, I think. Which why does June? No, the Zoot Suit riot parades.
Oh, I didn't know they did that.
Yeah, they did that in LA as a memoriam, as a remembrance of the Zoot Suits.
Oh, that's cool.
Which, by the way, why does June have so many historical events?
I don't know.
The Tulsa Race Massacre happened May 31st to June 1st. There's Juneteenth. There's Stonewall. Exactly. The Pachucos defended their neighborhood. And the fact that they literally, some of them were stripped naked. The fact that those who were stripped naked were also put on top of in front of, they were taken, had a photo taken and published on the front of a newspaper.
So you're demoralizing them even more.
Exactly. It was about,
look what I did, Mom.
And then on top of it, writing in a newspaper how, and you know what? I'm not actually surprised, because I wrote, yes, it gets hot. People do get rude, very rude. As somebody who lives in Arizona, I fully agree.
This is called the oven. It's no longer called Arizona.
I hate it. But something that it just, what's happening in LA feels very reminiscent to what's happening now. Just everything that's happening. And then June just being a creative month, and the reason, I know not what I remember what I was talking about. How I said I wasn't surprised when I heard about that they had written it in a newspaper how to strip a zoot suitor, was because when I had written the episode for next week, which is about the Tulsa Race Massacre, the Stonewall incident, and Juneteenth, right? When I'm writing all of these, I found references to media outlets that it was awful what they wrote in their media.
Yeah.
There are, I think in the Stonewall incident, the New York Times literally adds a slur to one of their front page papers.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, and it is insane. So that's why I say I'm not surprised anymore, because every time I read something, I'm like, this is baffling.
Yeah.
But now we are going to go talk about Albert Johnson, the Mad Trapper of Rat River. So it's a wild story.
Is it?
And I'm just going to use the name.
Like Mr. Toadwild? Or beyond that?
Beyond that.
Okay.
And I'm saying that, telling you this, the guy's name is Albert Johnson. That's what he called himself. We don't actually know if that was his real name. We don't even know his real name.
He uses an alias.
We don't even know his name. He kept Canada and the upper northeast of the United States on edge for 5 whole weeks.
Yeah.
And fun fact, if you go to Canada and you ask Canadians about this guy, they will tell you they know all about him. This guy has inspired poems, songs, movies, plays. It's insane. So, Canada, similar to the United States, suffered from the Great Depression, because this is based in the 30s. Yeah.
Oh.
Canada, similar to so in the 30s, this is when this takes place, is in 1931.
Oh yeah, we don't have the TV up because
we're so we might not see.
So we might not see your comment, but we'll try to catch it.
Yes. So Canada, similar to the United States, suffered from the Great Depression. Kind of we talked about with the Blackout River. England also suffered from the Great Depression. And other issues were also happening, like droughts. And if you recall, historically, what was it called in the United States when there was that giant drought in the Midwest? I'm quizzing her. I'm seeing. The Dust Bowl.
You think I paid attention to history? Obviously not.
I was a history nerd.
I would just be I'm like I like history now. I just didn't care for it then. It was like, oh, I got to go to school for it.
Exactly. Anyone. It should. That's the way it should be.
Yeah, it should be.
So there was the Dust Bowl going on in the United States. There were droughts in Canada as well, and this actually meant that the agriculture section of Canada suffered, which resulted in about 30% of the workforce out of a job. So Canada lost 30% of its workers. The economy was really affected in more rural areas and remote areas because they were lacking social welfare. Things that like urban areas had. They didn't have food pantries and soup kitchens that were really popular. Not even now like we do now. Like if you look up 1930s soup kitchen, you'll see images of like urban areas where they'll have soup lines or things like that. In rural areas, they didn't have that because there was no community. It was virtually every man for themselves.
Oh.
So
kind of you on your own
yeah.
situation.
And these people, they didn't really like charity, so they found other forms of work and tried to fix the fact that they didn't lost their job and everything on their own. So in the summer of 1931, in the peak of the Great Depression, a man named Albert Johnson arrived at Fort McPherson, which was a remote village in Northwest Territories of Canada. This town was about 650 miles from the nearest city of Whitehorse and Dawson City. Okay. Why are you getting the thing?
Just in case.
Okay. So, the remote villages. He's living in the Northwest Canada. So the very, very, very top
of Canada.
Close to Greenland. This town was 650 miles from the nearest city.
Oh, wow.
So it's pretty far. It wasn't unusual for this town to have people wander in because they would go through this town from more rural areas to get to cities, or people from the cities would pass to go to more rural areas.
If you think about it, you're living in Canada where it gets pretty cold.
Yeah, and that's something we're actually going to talk about.
It's like if you want to get somewhere, you better hurry up and get there before it snows.
Yeah. So, and Fort McPherson was a passerby town. Okay. Everyone passed through this town.
Okay.
It was the local practice of the local Royal Canadian Mounted Police, aka this RCMP, to question these people using the town to pass by, just to make sure they could figure out their plans and to ensure the person was equipped to handle the terrain they were in.
Yeah, because
they didn't want to go in and rescue people.
Can you blame them?
Because they were also really low funded, so it would take majority of their funding to even go out and rescue people who shouldn't have been out there in the first place.
When they tell you stay inside, stay inside.
Yes.
New York and all them stay inside when it's snowing.
This was about safety and to keep people from disappearing, and also it was about the cost, because if someone got stuck or needed to rescue, they'd have to send rescue teams, and those teams were pretty expensive, especially for the time being.
Yeah.
So on July 21st in 1931, so the middle of summer, Albert Johnson arrived. Edgar Millen, and remember Edgar Millen.
Okay, Edgar Millen
was the RCMP that was sent to question him.
Mm-hmm.
He was one of 3 RCMPs stationed in the town, and Millen found Johnson buying supplies in the general store.
Okay.
And Johnson said he had come from the Arctic through the Kenzie River system. Millen had been made aware of Johnson's presence by other trappers in the area.
Okay.
Basically, he was told by the native trappers that they believed that this man was messing with their traps.
Ooh.
They had even described him, so he knew what he looked like. So he knew that this was the person messing with their traps.
Like taking down their traps? Like
we'll talk about it. It happens again a little later, but in one instance, he triggered their traps and then threw them over a tree.
Okay.
Like he was triggering their traps, so their traps weren't catching any food.
Oh, that's not nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will say messing with another person's traps was a huge no-no at the time. That was essentially their livelihood.
Yeah, that's
for
their
some
food.
It was how they got their food. For some it was how they made their living. Millen knew Johnson was lying to him because he had not just arrived. He had been out there for a while messing with other people's traps.
Right.
But he was accustomed to this kind of behavior because that's kind of people were like skittish around everyone in police, especially if he just said he came from a rural area.
Yeah.
Hunters and fishers were also very territorial over their areas.
Oh God, yeah, because like you just said, that's their livelihood.
Exactly.
That's how they get their food, feed their family, or make their money.
They wanted to avoid competition, so their hunting ground was their hunting ground, and you didn't mess with it. So Millen didn't care where he had come from, but where he was going. That was his main priority.
Yeah.
From what Millen saw, he looked like an experienced tracker, and he looked like someone who wouldn't need assistance. And Millen didn't press because he was sure. Yeah, because he was sure that once Johnson got out into the wilderness, he would disappear. And he was just fine with that. He was like, good. I don't want this man being ever here again. I'm done with him.
Bye.
So Johnson, during this encounter, was given short, curt answers. Johnson didn't want to be in a conversation. And I mean, it was kind of, again, a normal thing for them not to want to be in a conversation.
Right.
This was he probably had not dealt with human interactions in a while. So for Millen, this was normal. If you're out in the wilderness and you don't have anyone to talk to, you're gonna forget how to interact with other human beings.
Well, yeah, because you're closed off. You said how many miles away?
650 miles from the nearest city.
So I mean, on a warm day, you could drive that. I mean, it's gonna take you a bit, but
And
still,
this was back when they didn't have cars.
Yeah, if you were closed off and you've pretty much secluded yourself, I mean,
yeah,
what can you do?
So Millen got the vibe that this guy was a live on my own. I don't do human interaction. Just leave me alone.
Humans are gross.
Yeah, exactly. So Millen was about to leave him alone, but he told Johnson, I don't care what you are going to do, but if you are going to trap, you need to get a license. Johnson's response was, whatever. He didn't care.
I'll do what I want.
Now, the reason trappers had to get a license was because if if you didn't have a license, they couldn't track you. They didn't know what you could be trapping. You would have to fill out paperwork. And I think this was because in the earlier years, they had accidentally almost completely eradicated beavers at one point.
Oh yeah, okay.
And hence the beaver had.
That would make me God. That made me do nothing. That makes sense, is what I was trying to say.
They had almost hunted them to extinction, and they were like, we need to limit how many trappers we have. If we have trappers, we need to...
Hence why now you have to have a fishing license, and you have to have a hunting license.
Exactly.
I mean, I get it to where, and it's important, like you're saying, to have all of that stuff, because you have to keep track of what people are hunting and going after.
Exactly.
Because some places you have to take it in.
Mm-hmm,
they have to weigh it. They have to clear it. It has to be documented. It's there's a whole process, but I see where people don't want to do that because of the whole process. I killed this myself. It is mine. Why do I have to turn this in? I'm going to eat it. Why do you need to know?
Exactly. So about a week later, Johnson returned to the general store, this time buying a canoe and also buying a whole bunch of other supplies.
Okay.
The clerk was like, you might need a motor for this boat. And Johnson flexed his muscles and said, these are good enough for me.
Got this. Got it over here, too.
These are good enough for me. Those are his words.
Oh, my gosh.
Don't
worry, Bob and Harry will
And I will say, though, he wasn't exaggerating.
Really?
Yeah. After getting the supplies, he got in his canoe and started paddling the Rat River. He spent the rest of the summer and fall building an 8x12 cabin on a plat of land he claimed for himself 70 miles from the Arctic Red River.
Don't forget to do paperwork on that and do taxes.
The Arctic Red River is where Mill and the other RCMPs were stationed.
Yeah.
So if Johnson wasn't building his home, he was hunting to build up his food supplies. He also took a lot of time learning the land around him.
Smart.
And while he was learning the land around him, he was also learning the trap lines. So he was learning where other trappers were trapping.
Okay. So this man ain't dumb.
Yeah. He pretty much knew all the trappers' lines near him. Specifically, 3 men. They are indigenous, and I hope I don't fuck up their last names. William Vatrukia, Jacob Drymeat, and William Narisu.
Sorry.
What? The last names?
Drymeat.
Yeah.
Sorry. Should not laugh at that. Because obviously that was a name that they were given.
Yeah, they were members of the local Lushu tribe.
Okay. Sorry, Jacob. Didn't mean to laugh at your name.
Yeah. Edgar Millen hadn't thought about Johnson ever since he met him. Johnson just disappeared from Millen's mind.
Well, which is is that not what he wanted?
Yeah, exactly. He wanted him to disappear.
No, don't start.
He hadn't thought about Johnson since he met him in the general store earlier that summer.
Yeah.
Especially, but he thought he did come to mind when Narisu showed up at the trading post on
Hermione, leave her be.
On Christmas Day.
Come on.
To report that Johnson had been messing with their traps.
Lay down.
Now, according to Narisu, Johnson had been springing the traps with nothing in them.
Yeah.
And he had been hanging them from trees.
The traps.
Yes,
the traps. You said that. Okay.
He was making it obvious that he was messing with the traps. It wasn't just a spring. Something could have escaped or something like that. It was
He made it known.
He made it known he was messing with these traps.
Okay.
So Edgar recalled that called who Johnson was and recalled that Johnson hadn't gotten a trapping license before leaving, like Millen told him to. So the RCMP took messing with trappers seriously, but they not only were taking him springing the traps, they were dealing with Johnson poaching because now he was hunting without a license, which
like
makes
poachers.
which makes it poaching. So it was going to be a problem. So Millen told Constable Alfred King and Joe Bernard to travel 60 miles to Johnson's cabin and talk to him about what was going on. The two officers traveled by dog sled and arrived a little after 10 a.m. on December 27th.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Again, no car.
2-day trip.
And it was on a dog sled.
Yes.
So that tells you right there they had to leave at a decent
because
time.
it was also winter time. So there's snow, it's cold.
And it gets darker faster.
Yeah. When they reached the cabin, they saw there was smoke coming from the cabin and snowshoes outside. So someone was obviously home.
Yeah.
He couldn't travel without his snowshoes because that's how bad the snow was. So King knocked on the door loudly to announce they were there, and there was no response. The constable knew he was home at one point because he saw Johnson watch them through the windows. And when he saw them watching him, he just closed the curtain.
I see you looking at me, but I'm not home.
He went, oh shit.
Wait, it's like this. Okay, here's the window. This is the blind. Ready? That's how we did it.
Oh my God. When I was writing this, I lost it. I always lose it at this part.
You know the best part about these side note. The best part about these little things that we do, there's always something stupid. There's something stupid in the whole thing. Rather nobody home but us chickens.
Exactly. The fact he saw them look at him and he still went,
I see you.
It's like the Homer in the bushes.
I'm so gonna put that in the comment now because that's hilarious. Homer in the bushes. What an idiot.
So now, after an hour with no response, they walked to the dog sled, and there was no way to get a hold of Millen or anything, so they couldn't tell him. So they traveled to RCMP headquarters in Eklavik, and I think I'm pronouncing that right, which was closer, so where they could obtain a search warrant and come back with more officers to go down the right path.
You leave. Just come back. Why didn't you just grab that before you went?
Well, because they thought he would just open the door for him because everybody in the past said just open the.
Nobody's home.
So they traveled there to get a search warrant and come back with more officers to do it down the right path.
Yeah.
No one could predict what was going to happen.
No.
Now, on the early morning of December 30th, after obtaining a search warrant, King and Bernard left for Johnson's cabin.
That's my favorite name, by the way.
They had added a couple more officers too, R.G. McDonald and Lazarus Kinley.
That's a mouthful.
The four men reached the cabin on December 31st at noon. They went to the cabin door and knocked, announcing they were there. They saw smoke coming from the chimney, so again they knew he was there.
I'm just waiting for another one of he watched him again.
King shouted they had a warrant to search the premise, and if Johnson didn't open the door, they were going to force it open anyway. So they approached the door, and they were coming from the side. King reached out to knock again, and seconds later, a loud shot rang out, and splinters shot in every direction from the door. Johnson had shot a shotgun through the front door, and it hit King in the chest.
Yeah.
And it knocked him off the porch into the snow.
Dude, that's a shotgun.
Yeah, and he was right next to the door.
He gonna have some splinters. He gonna have some little ballies in his chest.
McDowell and Johnson returned fire with each other with their pistols.
This is kind of where I wish we had that sound box. We could just start doing shoot noises back and forth.
In order to get King down long enough to keep him from getting any more bullets so he wouldn't get hurt, it was an insane shootout. McDowell almost got hit. There were bullets flying everywhere. They finally managed to get to the dog sled where they loaded King on one of the sleds and got out of there. Now, King was bleeding badly. He was still alive.
Wow. After all that and being that close to the door?
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
They needed to get to Eklavik, where the doctors were, and that was about 80 miles from where they were. So it was
that
not
name, Eklavik.
And so it's not a short distance. At this time, it was 40 below zero as well. And add in wind chill, it could drop below 90 below zero.
Never moving there.
So I'm going to tell you that they had actually did this. And as a skilled traveler with all of his supplies, could reach Eklavik in 2 days from where they were. And that was in ideal conditions.
Yeah, that don't sound ideal to me.
And that is a skilled traveler. That is not including carrying somebody who's actively bleeding and dying, right?
That's not an ideal thing to me.
McDowell rode as hard as he could, and they made it in 24 hours. He shaved a whole day off the trip.
Go, dude. Do it.
They just straight. And it wasn't an easy path. It wasn't a straight path.
Well, no,
it was one that needed, it was curved, it was up, it was down.
Well, you got all the snow. If there's a snowstorm happening, you got to think about the winds. I mean, there's a lot to take into.
And then under any circumstances, the wind chill would be the thing to stop or slow people down. And to give you an idea, everyone, about how cold it was, let's say you got a runny nose. The runny nose would freeze in your nose.
Okay, Dumb and Dumber on the little bike.
Yeah. Where it's like they're human icicles. Where
the snot running down his face.
Well, the snot wouldn't even leave your nose. The snot would freeze in your nose.
That would hurt.
Yeah. Also, you would get a layer of ice on your eyes. Yeah.
Your eyes.
And an ice film would collect on your eyelids.
Your eyes are as shiny as ice.
So that's what they were traveling through. And to prevent frostbite, the 4 men would take turns running King's face to keep him warm.
Rubbing his face?
Rubbing his face to keep him warm. Mind you, King had been shot in the chest. Immediately, when they got there, they took him to the hospital and he went immediately into surgery.
Oh, good.
The bullet had entered the upper left side of his chest and exited through the right, and it had missed all vital organs.
That was a shotgun. How? Line, stop it.
While he recovered, because he survived completely.
Well, good.
While he recovered, the 3 returned to headquarters to tell him what happened. Now, Inspector Alexander Ames had 11 officers under his command, along with another 3 by the Arctic Red River. Mm-hmm. Ames selected his best people to go to Johnson's place and had Millen and his constables also go. The men set out on January 4th, 1932. And they made camp 8 miles from the cabin, and they planned to ambush Johnson with no shots fired. They sent 2 officers ahead of everyone to scout. They reported fire from his chimney, so he was home.
At least that's what they think.
They made camp a little closer, and when everyone was together on January 9th, they headed to the cabin, spread out, and surrounded the cabin. Ames told Johnson to come out, and that King was alive, so at the very least you won't get charged with murder, and there is still time to resolve this matter without trouble.
Attempted.
Yeah, and basically he's like, you can come out, don't shoot, everything's going to be okay. They were greeted with gunfire from inside the cabin again. This time it led to an 18-hour gunfight.
Jeez.
Initially, the officers tried to get him close to the cabin, basically assuming that if they could get in, they could stop him. But every time they got close to the small front door, they would have to push back because there was endless gunfire and bullets.
And he's still using a shotgun.
But he was using all kinds of guns.
Oh, okay.
But the guns, the bullets weren't coming from the windows or the door. So they didn't know where it was coming from. Johnson had drilled holes near the floor in anticipation for them coming back. The angle was so confusing to the officers that were shooting because it felt like it was coming from the ground, but they couldn't see where it was coming from. When the officers were finally able to search their house, they found a trench in his cabin so he could shoot from the floor.
Was he in the
He
military?
built a trench in
That's
his own
hilarious.
cabin.
Well, I mean, again, dude ain't stupid.
It was impossible for the RCMPs
Dumb
to
for
shoot
shooting,
him
but
because they thought he was standing.
excuse me.
So they were
I'm sorry.
they were shooting where he would be standing, but he was actually on the floor. So they couldn't get him. So
Come here. You can come over here, Milan. The fan is not going to get you.
it was also 45 degrees below zero. So to prevent themselves from freezing, the RCMP officers had to move so they didn't freeze to death. They didn't know they were also going to have an 18-hour shootout, so they weren't fully prepared. They didn't bring enough food for them or even for the dogs.
It's like sitting there saying, hey, what are we going to do today, Bob? I don't know. I think we should go to a shootout.
Yeah, exactly. They had no idea.
Yeah.
They also built fires by the river, and they would change who was watching the cabin. This solved the frostbite, but none of the other problems. So Ames knew he had to come up with a plan quickly because it was getting dark, and that meant colder weather. So he told the men to grab the dynamite and put it in their jackets to warm it up because that's how cold
frozen.
It was.
Oh, wow. Frozen dynamite. That's what.
When the dynamite was warm enough to use, Constable Lang said he would throw the dynamite in the house. When night came and the flares went out, Lang approached quietly and they distracted Johnson by firing bullets at the home. Lang threw the dynamite on the roof. The explosion caused a giant hole in the roof and sent the chimney flying in different directions.
Oh, jeez.
In the chaos of the explosion, Lang broke open the door and came face to face with Johnson. But for some unknown reason, the constable froze and was unable to shoot him.
Oh, wow.
And at that moment, Johnson came to, and he started firing a pistol in one hand and a sawed-off shotgun in another.
Oh, that guy's dead. Wow. Wonder why he froze.
Lang stumbled out and ran to the riverbank. He survived.
The guy that just went in there?
Yeah.
He shouldn't have because, wow.
The RCMP agents held out till January 10th, and that is when Ames tried one last time to get him out of the house. With the last 4 pounds of dynamite.
Jeez, how much dynamite did they take?
Ames, they didn't bring enough food for them or the dogs, but they brought a bunch of dynamite.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, guys.
This is what happens when you let men pack.
She's not wrong there. That's why we live longer.
I'm
gonna make a t-shirt that says that.
When the 4 pounds of dynamite, Ames bundled it together, lit the fuse, and threw it at the cabin. The explosion ripped the roof off the structure and caved several of the walls in. His cabin essentially just crashed on Johnson. The agents were like, yes, we can catch him off guard because we blew his house up. Ames and one of the other constables ran in, and they were expecting to find him unconscious, at the very least. When they pulled open their door, there was Johnson, fully alert. And ready to shoot. He fired at them and even shot the flashlight out of Constable Garland's hand.
Wow. He's an experienced gunslinger.
This drove them back to the riverbank, and they had no choice but to return to Elkvik. Because they had blown him up twice, and he was still shooting. Back at headquarters, they went. They needed a new strategy. Several of the officers just wanted to go back and firebomb the cabin.
Bring food this time.
Ames wanted to take him alive. Ames on January 15th sent Lyndon Millen and Garland to the mouth of Rat River to keep an eye on the cabin. But by that time, Johnson had fled and was no longer in the cabin. Johnson was on the run. But by this time, King being shot in the 18-hour shootout had made national headlines. So the news is reporting on all of Johnson's craziness. The news called him the Mad Trapper of Rat River, while the rest of the team was strategizing. Garland and Milland were slowly approaching the cabin. They wanted to find any clues for any information. Garland said they couldn't believe he survived the last blast. They thought it could be shock that caused him to fire at them because of the blast was so bad. He wasn't there, and there wasn't a whole lot there either. They did find some concealed supplies high in the trees nearby.
Okay, smart.
He hid his supplies in trees regularly.
Apparently.
And that's how much of an outdoorsman he was. He was like, I gotta hide stuff up in the trees.
Well, and a lot of people do that too to keep bears from
Yeah.
their food too.
They also found his canoe, which was still tied up at the river edge. That meant he had fled on foot.
Oh wow!
Not by river.
That's funny that he did not take that.
Yeah. A search party left on January 16th in the direction of the cabin, and they were really prepared. They had a two-way radio to communicate. They had enough supplies. They had learned from their previous errors. Warnings were going around the town to let people know about the Mad Trapper. This meant that those who lived in rural areas actually went into town and stayed there waiting for him to get caught. They were so scared of him. Mm-hmm. They were like, "Nah, I'm not doing this."
You know what I'm always curious about? And it is more or less self-explanatory. But how they come up with the names for these people that the killers, and
he was living on Rat River, and he had basically caused this giant shootout, and he was a trapper.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Trapper. That kind of sounds self-explanatory. Yeah. But like these ones where they have to sit there, Zodiac Killer, and it may be because of
the Zodiac Killer was because he named himself the Zodiac Killer.
Oh, so they
like the BTK killer was actually, he demanded be called the BTS, but the news went, bind, torture, strangle doesn't sound as well as BTK. Yeah. So we're gonna change it to BTK. And he's like, you know what? That's actually a really good change.
He's all proud of that one.
He's like, you did good.
Thanks for picking it.
Yeah. What? So the RCMP for 2 weeks looked for Johnson. But because it was so cold and snowing, they couldn't find anything. Then,
well, not only that, okay, he ran on foot, correct? Is that what you said? The snow's going to cover his tracks.
Yeah.
So how are you going to sit there and find anything? Well, let's keep going. We might find him.
Well, here's the thing. No? In late January, Ames heard about shots being fired near Bear River. Ames sent 3 men scouting, thinking Johnson was looking for or hunting food. Mm-hmm. They agreed to all meet together to discuss what they found. Millen asked around the local tribe about Johnson, and the tribe said they believed he was in the small cabin that was abandoned because they believed he couldn't cross the hills in this weather.
Well, that's kind of smart.
Now, I'm going to tell you something, is don't underestimate Johnson ever.
Apparently. The dude had a freaking trench.
The 4 constables, along with the help of the tribe, found Johnson's distinct-looking snowshoe prints in the snow. So they were able to follow them, and it led to essentially a natural covered barricade. Now it was a natural barricade because it was made of trees and boulders. Now there were prints leading into it, but none leading out. The 4 constables spread out and approached as quietly as they could towards the entrance of this barricade. Mm-hmm. When, without any warning, Johnson started firing at them from the tree line. All 4 of them opened fire in the vicinity, and where they thought the gunfire was coming from.
And that's the horrible thing, is you're in the wilderness, you're out in the middle of nowhere. That thing, like you're saying, it could come from anywhere. Mm-hmm. So they're just randomly firing
where they think he is.
And they could have hit somebody. They could have killed somebody at that point too, mm-hmm. because he's over here. Let's shoot this way because that's where we think he is. But
who knows?
It's the open. You don't know which way it's coming from.
Now there was no return fire, so the 4 of them thought he was incapacitated, or hey, we killed him. So they waited 2 hours before they went in to make sure they killed him or injured him, because they've done this game. They've done it before. They thought he was dead, and then he wasn't.
Right.
When they got within 25 yards of the tree line, one of the constables shouted, "Watch it," and dove for cover behind a snowbank as a rifle shot struck the ground right where he had been standing.
Oh, jeez.
2 of the officers also dove behind different things, so they weren't in the line of fire. Millen stood his ground and dropped to his knees and fired 3 shots in Johnson's direction. Johnson returned fire and shot Millen in the chest. Millen reportedly bolted upright, spun around, and fell down into the ground.
Oof.
2 officers provided cover fire for Garland to run and grab Millen and take him to safety.
But isn't this the same guy that was shot once already?
No, King was the one who was shot.
Okay.
Millen is the one who told him, "Hey, you need to get a license."
Oh, okay.
They tied Millen's shoelaces together and dragged him out of Johnson's line of fire. When they were safe from being shot at, when they turned Millen over, they saw the bullet had torn through his heart and had killed him instantly.
Well, let's see. He can't. Yeah.
So when he shot up and he just
spun around,
yeah,
he's gone.
The remaining officers retreated into the woods away from Johnson's line of sight, and they built a little area and thing to protect Millen's body from animals and things like that. For when they came back, the officers made their way back to the campsite a mile away. The next day, one of them returned to get Constable Millen's body, and another returned to Eklavik to tell everyone what happened. Sergeant Riddle made it back a little more than 24 hours and reported the death to Ames. Ames sent out the report across RCMP wires so all agents knew. Reports also got back to the media about Johnson's third escape, but also his killing of an officer. It made headlines in North America. One newspaper called him a two-gun hermit, and the press maintained a sober tone when referencing the death of the officer, which was really nice because during this time they didn't really, do that for people.
Yeah, no.
The news did talk about how this guy escaping for a third time made the RCMP look really bad, and the longer he was on the run, the more dramatic it got when they were talking about this.
Yeah.
They ran the risk of turning him into an anti-hero, and they didn't want that to happen among anti-establishment residents.
Yeah.
That could cause too many problems for them if this happened. So not wasting any time, Ames requested a plane to fly over while RCMP took the ground and did a ground search. In response, they got a small craft piloted by William May, who was also called Wap May, who was a member of the Royal Flying Corps and one of the flying aces that shot down the Red Baron during World War I.
We gotta do that one too.
For those of you who don't know,
cool.
The Red Baron was a German plane that seemingly couldn't be shot down until May.
Guess what? Hence the whole peanut reference. So they use that in Peanuts a lot. Where Snoopy, if you ever watch, side note, so if you ever watch Peanuts, literally, and you want to know why they're showing Snoopy typing, and then you see like a little flashback thing of a Red Baron. Snoopy's like kind of like the Red Baron.
Yeah.
And you can't shoot the plane down.
Yeah. May was a living legend, and that helped open a lot of northern territories, and while he was in the plane, he could overlook a lot of areas.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ames was headed towards the site of Millen's murder on February 5th. When they went there, they were determined that he didn't leave the area after the shootout, that he instead climbed. So they said that he didn't leave. He didn't back out and walk a different way. They realized that this man had climbed the 7,000-foot cliff wall to escape traveling the hard-packed snow on the creek beds.
Let's see.
He climbed a 7,000-foot wall.
Wall? Snow. You could die. Fall off the wall. You could, well, I mean, his choice, I guess, right?
He climbed a 7,000-foot wall.
Why would you? That's just nuts. Why?
Okay, why would you climb a 7,000-foot wall?
We're going from no to why. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Why would you do that? Trying to prove something?
Which let him work quickly because he was alone and he knew where he was going. So in mid-February, Ames was joined by a couple of indigenous tribes who were also like, man, fuck this man. I'm gonna help you catch him. They also wanted to catch Johnson as much as everyone else.
Well, because he's close to where their tribes and stuff are, and the indigenous people
causing these shootouts.
Yeah, and they could hit one of them or their family, anybody in the tribe there.
February 12th, an indigenous man said Johnson had seen snow showing on the west side of the indigenous had seen snow showing on the west side of the Richardson Mountain, which meant snowshoeing. That's what it was. On the west side of Richardson Mountain, meaning that Johnson had traveled 90 miles since he had been seen 3 days earlier.
Mm.
So he walked 90 miles in the snow in 3 days.
Wow.
The group made its way to the west side of the mountain, and on February 14th, May spotted Johnson's tracks from the air, and it appeared he was traveling west. He was using the frozen riverbank to walk, and they determined the tracks were 24 hours old.
Mm.
The group continued to follow, and they ran into a lot of signs that he had been there, and the more they walked, the shorter the distance got between them. And finally, on February 17th, they found tracks in a campfire that was less than a day old. Johnson left the river, climbed a tree to see where the search party was, and he saw them actually head south.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, the search party was hitting a bend in the river that would shoot north into his general direction. But he thought they were going south.
Okay.
So he was like, I can slow down. Ames knew that he was on the right trail. They didn't realize how close they were. He continued on his path, and when he turned a sharp corner, Johnson saw a search party 300 feet in front of him.
Oh, jeez.
He quickly strapped on his snowshoes. While he was running for the tree line, he was firing at the search party. Sergeant Ear Heresy, who was leading a team of dog sleds, jumped from his sled and grabbed his rifle and returned fire. Hearsay was shot in the head, shot in the knee.
Oh, I was about to say.
We're going to get there. He was shot in the knee where the bullet ricocheted and traveled upwards through his elbow into his chest. Think about holding a gun. He has it on his knee.
Okay.
The bullet ricocheted off through his elbow into his chest.
What the frick?
He survived, by the way.
Oh, apparently. Okay, I'm surprised.
Yeah.
Is that? Yeah. No. What in the world?
The other men followed him into the woods. They followed his tracks and got to a cover station that he had built for himself, which was essentially a ditch covered by snowbanks. Now it's possible that Johnson underestimated how devoted Ames and his men were at this point. There was no chance he was coming out alive.
Well,
While
gave
one
you that first clue there, Johnson. That the fact that they were. I mean, come on now.
While one team was in front, another team circled around behind him at a slightly elevated angle.
So their own little SWAT team.
Yeah. He continued firing at the people in front, and when he turned over to reload, the people above fired, and one of the bullets hit him in the spine.
Ooh.
By the time they reached him in the ditch, Albert Johnson had been shot 7 times, and it was the spinal bullet that had killed him.
Ooh.
They were aware he had tricked them, so they actually waited 10 to 15 minutes before approaching his body to confirm he was dead.
All because of the trench. All because of the fact they blew up his house with him in it. Wow.
After 5 weeks of chasing, it took 5 weeks. This was in the span of 5 weeks.
For they made sure he was dead?
No, 5 weeks of chasing him.
Okay.
5 weeks of chasing this man, and they have finally got him. Throughout the whole ordeal, Albert Johnson never spoke a word to them. From December 27th all the way to February 27th, he never said a word.
Wow.
Never spoke a word.
Okay, that's weird. Usually people are speaking when they're shooting. You'll never take me alive, coppers.
May landed his plane nearby, and Heresy was loaded onto the plane, and he was treated. The next day, they went to go get Johnson's body, and the rest of them traveled by dog sled. When the news got a hold of his death, it was a celebratory thing. Everyone in North America was happy. The days after, the RCMP that was involved told their stories to the news, and a lot of people couldn't believe it.
All you had to do was get a license. That's all you had to do.
That was all you had to do.
You just get a
license.
And none of this would have happened. You could have still been trapping food, but nope. then you wanted to not get a license, and then you wanted to kill a cop.
Yeah. Sergeant Riddle said Johnson fought bitterly to the end, emptying his rifle, and it was the act of reloading when he was killed. So he
Jeez.
turned over to reload. The more the stories went around, the more the stories became embellished. The New York Times said that May went from being an essential to being a major character. The thought, and one of the things that they had published that he was the one who bombed the house. May came out and said that wasn't me. I didn't do that. I was only there for a short period of time.
Yeah. Duh.
Once Johnson's body was returned to the RCMP, they realized that the body didn't look like the pictures that were published in the press.
Do they ever?
Pictures that were published of him turned out to be of a respected man in Princeton, British Columbia.
Oh my gosh.
Even though few actually spoke to him and he gave the name Albert Johnson, that was most likely not his name.
Oh jeez.
In the early 20th century and before, if you gave your name to somebody, everyone assumed it was true. So if I walked up to somebody and said, "My name is Martha May," everyone would believe my name was Martha May because they didn't need proof. That's difficult now, but back then it was super easy.
Hence identity theft.
Yeah. So I lost my place. In the months that followed, they circulated his photo that was taken after his death. Hi.
Was that?
Thomas said, "Hi,
Oh.
Martha May." Circulated a photo that was taken after his death in order to find out who the man actually was, and for a while nothing came up. But finally, in the late 1932, RCMP officials said that he strongly looked like a man named Arthur Nelson, who was living in British Columbia in the 1920s but traveled north to the Yukon and was last seen in May 1931. Remember, he appeared in July 1931.
Yeah.
Other than that, no one knew a whole lot about Nelson either. So this leads us to one of the big theories about a man named about his name. So Arthur Nelson was essentially a criminal named Johnny Johnson who lived in North Dakota.
Huh.
Johnny Johnson was born in Norway in 1898 and immigrated with his parents. In 1904, when they got here, they found a farm. There, after living on the farm for a little bit, Johnson got into a bank robbery with another guy who was wounded and captured. Johnson was arrested and did jail time, and in 1918, but returned in early 1920s, and then disappeared a couple months later. Arthur Nelson appeared in British Columbia, and then disappeared and reappeared as Albert Johnson. North Surrey was the same as the RCMP's, and they requested Johnny's fingerprints to compare them, but the test proved inconclusive.
I was gonna say they don't think they really had. No, they didn't have really DNA back then either, except for the fingerprints.
Albert Johnson's identity came up again in 2007 with a team of filmmakers when they got permission to exhume his body and do genetic testing on him.
Nice.
The examination showed some interesting results. Johnson had been 30 to 40 years old and of Swedish descent and had spent a lot of time in the American Midwest. And he had suffered from scoliosis. Oh. Which, if you think about, also the spinal bullet was what killed him, and he suffered from scoliosis. It's kind of ironic. Perhaps more unusual was that he had undergone severe dental work for the time, and the dental work was also sophisticated for the time.
Oh wow! Maybe it was a time traveler.
Maybe. So it didn't add up to a mountain man who was self-reliant, suddenly undergoing tooth care.
Maybe he was living obviously he was living a double life.
They learned a lot about him, but they were unable to conclusively give him a name. To this day, we don't know who he was or why he did it. And that's Albert Johnson.
Damn. I mean, should have just got a license.
If he had gotten a license, none of this would have happened.
So yeah. get a license. When they tell you to get a license,
just get a license.
Just get
Don't
a
poach.
license.
Don't poach. This will lead to bad things like a shootout and dynamite. And can you imagine how angry you have to be? Also, you have to get. He built himself an 8x12 cabin
and a trench.
And a trench, and then they blew up his place. Can you imagine how also angry he had to have been? They blew up my house.
Yeah, it's like, come on now.
But then again, if he had just gotten a license, they wouldn't have blown up his house.
There you go.
Also, if he had just opened the door instead of Homer Simpsoning it and hiding and just straight up whoop.
I like that. That was funny.
Why? It's stupid.
It's not worth it.
It is not worth it. Ladies and gentlemen,
just do it.
Do not do this. But that's Albert Johnson.
I'm gonna say I didn't really like this case that much.
You didn't like this case?
There was like, I mean, there was funny parts, yes. I don't know. They're unlike the other ones. I think this would be my least favorite.
Least favorite,
just for the simple fact of, I mean, usually when we do these, people always have things to say or slur. You know, they're always saying something.
Exactly. They always are like, "This is my reasoning." Meanwhile, this man is like, didn't say a word. His only words that he really said was "whatever."
It's like,
or no. I can do it myself.
Yeah, these are good enough.
These are good enough for me.
Good enough for me. Like, come on. Obviously, they were.
Somebody said he was the original Chad. Have you heard that meme?
No.
Chads are like jocks.
Oh, okay, yeah, you say jocks. I know what you mean.
Yeah. Chad is another term for a jock. So if you hear someone be called a Chad.
Yeah, see, I was born in 1980. We knew it when you said jock.
It means they're not very. They got an ego, but they're not very smart.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's Albert Johnson. I got a hoot writing this. It was a nice little break to write this one.
Yeah, within the next coming 2 weeks, week.
Yeah, because next week is gonna be it's okay. It is the historical event one. So we talk about Juneteenth. So going into the history of Juneteenth, why Juneteenth is a thing. We'll also explain. We'll also are going to be breaking a little bit of a. I wouldn't hate to say lie that we've been taught through the education system about Abraham Lincoln, but we're gonna reveal some really hard truths about Abraham Lincoln. Yeah. And then we're gonna talk about the Tulsa Race Massacre, which is heartbreaking to write about. And then we are also going to talk about Stonewall and a couple of people who are involved in Stonewall. Just because it's Pride Month. Tulsa Race Massacre happened again May 31st, beginning of June 1st. So happened in June. Again, you have Juneteenth, it's in June. And Stonewall, it is Pride Month. So doing a little bit of history on these. So it's a little bit of a historical week. It gives us a little bit of a break.
Yep.
Because I am going to warn you, when we do our Fred and Rose West episode,
get your popcorn. Just kidding.
It's
very from what I'm understanding. She hasn't told me anything really, and if she did, I've already forgotten. Graphic.
It is not graphic what they do to their victims, because as much as I hate to say it, I will give you this heads up: they don't find the victims until the victims are skeletons. So
I think
they assume what happened. There is a graphic case that occurs in the beginning. She manages to live, so I'll give you that little bit of a joy. She manages to survive. And then in the end, in the part 2, the second episode, because this is going to be 2-parters. When I was typing up the script, part 1 is 17 pages. And to give you some clarification on that, the Bayou Strangler was also 17 pages. And then I'm writing part 2 right now, and I am on page 11. So that is, so far, I have written a total of 28 pages on these 2 people. They are monsters. They are horrendous people.
And we will put of your discretion is advised, because
Yes.
when she's saying that they don't, the whole graphic thing with their victims, it's more or less, hey,
Hermione.
No, to
it's not
in their own household. Let's just put it that way.
It's also about people who live in their own house, because Fred and Rose have children, and I will just tell you that much.
And we will not go into gruesome. I mean,
graphic,
she'll tell it, but
we're just gonna
detail. It's just to give people now a heads up.
Yeah,
for when we start doing this, and we'll keep reminding you that.
And I will, before I do anything, I'm going to be like, heads up, we're going to talk about it right now. We're going to talk about something really difficult right now.
So if you don't want to hear it and you're listening by earbud, just take out the earbud.
I'm going to try to limit it as much as I can. I may bring up some things like it happened in this room more than anything, and then that's it. I'm not going into graphic detail. That's unnecessary.
Because the one episode that we did, I told
the Blackout Ripper, yeah.
After we got done, I literally told her, I might have said it in the video, that one made me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That one made me
and I will say this one. There was a couple of instances where I was like, this is making me uncomfortable. I think in the part 1, I am going to go into a little bit of graphic detail about what occurred, but because it's important to understand their pathology. And maybe, just like the fear.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what happened to the other victims, because again, they weren't found until they were skeletons. So that's the only time you're going to hear. But I'm going to try to do as much as I can censor myself.
Aren't we doing? No, that's next.
Yeah. Next one is Stonewall, all the other fun historical events. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to do Fred and Rose West. And then we're going to have, I'm thinking of, we're going to do the kidnapping of Barbara Jean. So it's going to be a nice little
break from
from
Fred and Rose.
It's going to be a break from murder, and just attempted murder. I
need to remember to go on here and just do a post of what is coming up, so they have a heads up of what's coming up.
And then Michelle does her Disneyland.
Yep, and just about the park. I'm not going to go into full detail of. Well, I mean, part of it does pertain to Walt Disney, obviously, but I can just give you a little side note and give you a movie reference that you can go watch it yourself. Because did you watch it? I know John did.
I think I did.
I think we were going to watch it together. No, you haven't seen it yet.
Oh, wrong one.
Yeah. The movie Walt Before Mickey.
Yeah.
I don't think you've seen that one. So before we do the live on Walt Disney himself, I'm going to have her watch that movie. But it is called Walt Before Mickey. And I will say, when we go to do that, I will let you know. Go watch it. It's really good. You will cry a little bit, because I did. Because you're just learning about a man who took the most wonderful, magical thing in the world and built it. And I can't wait to get to him to just tell you guys how he did things. But by you watching that movie as well, you will understand it a little bit more of what I'm coming from, for like references. If I say something, you're like, oh yeah, okay, I remember that was in this. So there's like a lot of things. Now with the park, I'm actually going to throw in a little bit of hauntings with it, because it does pertain to Disneyland. So I'm going to put a little bit of hauntings in there too. And I got to do my research on it. I know of a few rides and stuff where things have happened with people. I will even go over the rides, like what you're kind of do the timeline. I mean, obviously July 17th, 1955 is when it started. Mm-hmm. I'll even start like with day one. What happened with day one?
Yeah.
Day one was not, it was a great day because there was a lot of people, but some things did happen and they figured it out. But I think that'll be a very informational and, fun day to, like you said, get away from the murders.
Yeah, get away, get a nice break. For those of you who have not heard, I get nightmares when writing these, and so I have to write them, and I know I probably shouldn't, and that might be why I'm having all the nightmares, is I type them all at once, so I can give myself a little break, because even when I was taking them 1 week at a time, I was getting nightmares. That's actually why I sped it up. So I will write cases weeks in advance.
Which makes sense.
Because I will get nightmares after, I think, what was it? Was it Friday?
I think so.
That I woke up and I was swinging my arms. I was fighting something. I was just swinging in my sleep. I woke myself up. I was swinging that hard.
So that means now, because we're going to be getting closer, when we get ready to do Fred and Rose, I'm going to have to start doing my research on the...
Yeah, when we do Fred and Rose, I think I will be doing the Barbara Jean, and then I'm going to give myself a little bit of a vacation time. So I'm not writing about kidnappings or murders while talking about Fred and Rose.
And I'll start my thing, too, because I've been watching...
Have fun at the pool.
Have fun at the pool, ma'am. Thank you for being on here.
Thank you.
We appreciate you. Love you. But then I'll also give me a chance too. I can bring like a lot of things that I do have as well. I'll even bring in my hidden Mickey books. Just edit, and it's about the rides. It's about the where you can find hidden Mickeys throughout the whole entire park. Yeah, can't wait to do that one because everybody knows I love Disney. I'm excited because I actually get to sit. I try not to do too much Disney stuff on my personal videos on our J&M Adventure channel because it's usually always talked about. You know, we're getting excited because I know Oogie Boogie Bash is coming up. So there's a lot of people.
I'm mad. Disney, if you watch this, please post when you are selling the tickets. I want to buy my Oogie Boogie Bash tickets.
But that being said, do not...
Mad at you.
Do not purchase your tickets through a third party because they will not let you in the park. If you purchase your thing off of eBay or anything like that, they will not let you in because people have a tendency of, and now they're putting a stop to it though because they did take care of that. If you go to the park, let's say, okay, I bought the tickets. Well, now John and I can't go because of financial reasons or something came up, not just financial, but something came up. Well, Justin and Abigail want to buy it. They can't. I'm out that money. So be sure, number one, that you're going to go and that you're going to enjoy the event. 2, do not buy them off of eBay or any ticket selling, what do you call that? Oh my gosh, there's a word for it. It's right there. Can't think of it. Just don't buy anything from a third party. You can only get it through the Disneyland app.
I'm going to make this abundantly clear. Disney, give me the Oogie Boogie Bash tickets.
She wants that date.
I know. I keep every day. Every day I check the Disneyland website. Every day I wait for them to tell me when they are just putting the tickets on sale. I'm not even buying the tickets.
We have the dates. We got the dates.
We know the dates we want to buy.
Fucking dates to buy.
We just need the date the tickets go on sale.
Which is usually mid-June to July.
Literally, when you look it up, it goes, tickets usually go on sale late June, early July. Clarification.
So, and we have a couple of coworkers that went, so we can also find out from them when they usually go too. So
they go on. I've already asked them.
Oh,
they go on sale late June, early July. It depends. Every year they do it a little bit earlier, except this year.
Well, that's because, and they're also doing more Oogie Boogie dates because they used to not do as early as August.
I just want to buy my tickets.
I know you do. There used to be just for September to October. They didn't start pushing for August until they noticed how popular it was. Then they started adding more dates to it.
I just want my tickets. If you can't tell, I really want my tickets.
She wants to go.
I really want to go to Oogie Boogie Bash. Disney executives, if you see this, please.
You're hilarious. Oh my god.
I know they're never going to see this.
Probably not. I don't know. I mean, who knows?
Blows up all of a sudden.
Yeah. You're like, what the heck is happening?
But yeah, so we got a fun couple weeks ahead of us.
We do.
I'm going to actually finish typing up the Fred and Rose West case today.
Just to get it done. So you can start on Miss Barbara Jean.
So I can start on Miss Barbara Jean, because let me tell you, it's awful. I think I am after they killed their last victim. And then they go on and assault somebody. And that's where I had to end it. Because I'm going to give you a heads up. The victim was 13.
Oh, God. Yeah.
And Fred is in his 50s. Granted, I mean, I shouldn't be surprised because Rose was 15 when she met him and is 28 years old.
Yeah.
They are. This
Sick
phrase.
people. Sick people.
This phrase is the epitome of feel bad for the child, but not the adult. I don't feel bad for the adults. The adults got what they got and they deserved it.
All right. That one person. Thank you. Thank you, Thomas, for getting on here and being on here with us. We appreciate you. And Jamie, if you're still on there, hello, Miss Jamie. Glad you were able to jump on here.
I think she kept hopping on and off because I kept seeing the number change from 2 to 3.
Oh, that's fine. She's probably cooking
even
dinner.
4 to 3. I think we kept somebody on for a while.
And yeah, so I mean, she's probably cooking dinner too.
Yeah.
So, see you at work tomorrow, Thomas. I believe, correct? And still debating on Wednesdays if I want to do videos. I don't know. That's usually my cleaning day for the house because everybody's at work.
You will not see me tomorrow. I already came in on one of my days off.
So yeah,
I'm
so she's off tomorrow.
Gonna be staying home and hopefully not crying.
But yeah, so we will see you guys next Monday, pretty much same time. Running a little late today because we left work a little later than usual, but that's all right. I mean,
we were chit-chatting.
We were chatting with some peeps. But
got Dutch Bros too. That was definitely a huge delay.
We needed that
time.
for today.
We did.
We probably need it for Fred and Rose too. Who knows?
That's actually a really good point, Justin.
I know. We need Dutch Bros for in the next couple weeks for Fred and Rose.
In 2 weeks' time, we're gonna need one and one, and we're gonna need the big ones,
not the small ones.
Not the small ones.
But
and we're also gonna put vodka in it.
I mean, I have to work the next day, so we'll see what happens.
I mean, you could call out.
I could if I had time. I don't. But all right, guys, we love you. Thank you again for being on here. Appreciate everybody. See you guys next Monday. All right. Bye.
Oh, and tell us how you feel about the new set.
Oh yeah. Do you like us sitting right here?
Or do you like us on the couch?
Or do you like us on the couch? I mean, I kind of like us sitting right here because then the cats do have room to roam around on the table like Willow's doing. Willow, come here.
And Totaro isn't scared of me picking her up and carrying her.
Come here.
We're just sat.
Come here.
Willow.
Come here. Here, say hi. She's like, what the hell, Mom? Hi, everybody. You're fine. All right, we're gonna
Say
get
hi,
up there so
everyone.
I can make dinners. Don't you drink my coffee?
Do you have any words to say? Just nothing else?
He's like, nope, Mom's home. That's what matters.
Okay.
All right, get off here and go make some din din. We will see you guys next Monday. Love y'all. Bye.
Bye.